What's that old story about the card table? If you sit down and you don't see the sucker, you're it.
Absolutely.
So let's not have anybody be in that position of being unaware and then losing because they didn't maximize their education.
Let me ask you this: from a strategy point of view, what do you prefer to trade, and what market specifically?
Well, I prefer stocks and options on stocks because instead of just trading the index, which of course might be, say, 500 stocks, never was it more clear than this past year during the pandemic how that index wasn't a good representation of the stock market anymore because you had the technology sector going ballistic after the pandemic lows. You had all these new stay-at-home and digitization themes of what's happening post-pandemic. And then you had all these reopening sectors that were doing terribly, right? Because they weren't reopening as fast as anybody had hoped. And so the reality is that when you can find individual stock stories, and more importantly stories, there's charts and patterns on these charts. We call them systems, trading systems, where they give you, take the emotion out and you say follow the buy arrow, follow the sell arrow, the exit arrow. Yeah. And it makes your job a lot easier. You mentioned ego earlier, Scott. And your biggest thing as a trader or in business is get your ego out of the game.
1,000%.
Because when you get that emotionally invested in something, and that vesting of believing that you think you've got it figured out is what ends up really hurting you, and it actually makes you less flexible. It actually makes you get stuck in either an idea, like you said, it's not working on, say, a marketing conversion piece, or and you were so convinced it was going to work. You knew this was going to work.
Oh, I believed it.
And then when it doesn't, you're like, no, it's got to work. I just must have missed a little something. Yeah. And so it's one of those where by not being that vested, it actually makes you more flexible to be able to say, hey, the market's giving me feedback that it's not working like I thought it was going to work. It's time for me to cut and run, come back to play another day in that particular stock. And we will then use option strategies on that stock that either can substitute for the stock with a lot less capital or create spread strategies that can help to further reduce our dollars and our customers' dollars at risk. So that way, you might be able to take a name like Amazon or Google. It might cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy 100 shares, and we can control that hundreds of thousands of dollars for literally a few $100s.
Yeah.
So that's where, of course, leverage can happen, but of course you then have to make sure you have an edge. And that's where I always remind people that the edge is what's going to carry you through. An edge doesn't guarantee anything. It just means you have a probabilistic advantage. And then you're playing the probabilities, which means that's why you don't bet it all on anything, because it's like would Vegas want to take their edge that they have when you sit down at their tables, and would they want to say, we'll bet you on this one hand that we're going to be right? They would never do that. They want to promote you playing for a long time across a large number of hands to extract their edge.
That's why they give you the free drinks.
That's why they give you the free drinks, the cards that reward you the longer you play, right? Because their edge is being extracted whether you know it or not. Even if you have a good lucky streak, congratulations. But most people, I was amazed when I fly out to Vegas for a conference, everybody's all excited, the plane's buzzing, and when I fly back, it's real quiet.
Asleep.
It's real quiet. It's like very few are telling great stories of the success they had because Vegas extracted their edge. You want to do the same thing and create that house edge for your own trading or your own business, whatever you're looking to extract in terms of your advantage, your particular skill set in whatever you do in life. It's a great life principle. Trading is really just a microcosm of these same principles. Don't get your ego involved. Stay unemotional. Stay objective. Exactly. Don't be greedy. You hit your objectives, take your profits. When you hit your stop loss, take it. Don't make excuses. A lot of people rationalize and say, oh, well, it's a good company. I bought it. It'll bounce back. And that rationalization turns short-term traders into long-term, quote, investors or bag holders. We don't want that for anybody.